Good morning. We're actually getting to the point of really winding down in our study here. Just a quick review of schedule. Today we're wrapping out the new material from our study for the flood. Next week is going to be a wrap-up recap questions. So what I've sort of put together is for next week, what I'm not doing is just saying, okay, does anybody have any questions? Crickets, 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 crickets. So what I'm going to do is sort of go through each of the four sections that we looked at, okay? Going through the flood with the from the Bible, looking at the scientific standpoint of it, looking at the reason for the flood, and then the real reason for the flood. And just sort of some real quick bullet points of some of the things that we talked about, and then any reflections, particular things that stood out to you, questions, that type of thing. So that way, as we do it each part, instead of, because it is a little overwhelming. We're looking at, okay, do you have any questions for a study that we started back on the first week of April? So this way, sort of looking at each section and sort of bring to mind each section. And then at the end, I've got to touch on sort of the big picture stuff. And I'll mention this again next week. But as I always used to tell my physics class on one of the very first days of class, unless you're going to college to be a physics major or an engineering major, you are going to forget about 80% of everything I teach you within 6 months of you leaving my class. I know it. It's going to happen. I'm not so egotistical to believe that the material that I'm teaching is so important that you're going to remember it until your deathbed. I know that's not going to happen. It's a use it or lose it kind of thing. But there were some big picture or big idea things that I wanted to get across, and it's sort of it's unfortunately what so many, particularly high school level teachers, forget, is that their particular topic is not the end all be all most important thing on the face of the planet. But there are some big picture ideas that every teacher wants to get across. Critical problem solving was always something that, all right, I don't care if you're going to be a physics major or not. Critical problem solving is something you're going to use all throughout your life. Critical analysis of material and things like that. So I'm going to touch on sort of the big picture points that I hope that you get out of our study from all the way starting back in April. So where we're at, this has sort of jumped a little bit in some ways, in that we've gone from the flood, and it is one of my big picture points that I'm going to talk about next week, is that we need to keep in mind that as we read the Bible and as we look at stories in the Bible, these individual stories are not just a story in isolation. They are a theme or a thread that feeds its way all the way through the Bible, which is exactly where we're at here. We so often look at the flood as man was bad. God said, you're really bad. I'm going to wipe you all out and save Noah. And 40 days and 40 nights of rain. There's the flood story. But there's a lot more to it. And that's where we're at. That the flood story is all part of the big thread of what we refer to as the seed war that goes back to Genesis 3 and talking about the prophecy of that I will put enmity between you and the woman, you meaning Satan, and the woman, between your seed and her seed, and that you will bruise his heel, but he will crush your head. The prophecy of Christ and eventually the defeat of Satan. So we looked at then, okay, so I want to say put yourself in the mind of Satan, but if you're Satan and somebody, or if you're anybody, and somebody tells you you're going to lose, and this is why you're going to lose, what's your immediate reaction to that? how am I going to keep from losing? None of us want to lose. So Satan's trying to figure out ways, how can I break this prophecy? And that's the seed war. That's what we looked at. And we started with Cain and Abel was the first one, the flood being the second big piece. And now we're sort of going onward of how is Satan trying to defeat the prophecy. And his third attempt is with Moses and Egypt. If we look in Exodus 1, 7 to 8, 15 to 17, and 22. This works a lot better when I have somewhere to lay my Bible down. So in Exodus 1, there we go. Exodus 1, verses 7 to 8, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who knew not Joseph. Remember, Moses is after Joseph. Joseph coming down into Egypt eventually becomes like the number 2 guy to Pharaoh, and brings all the rest of his family, which eventually becomes the nation of Israel. And eventually Joseph dies, and eventually that Pharaoh dies, and all of a sudden you've got a king in Egypt that's looking at this whole bunch of Jewish people and going, they're going to overwhelm us here. So jumping down to 15 to 17, and the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Siphrah and the other was Puah. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and you see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, he shall live. And then jump down to verse 22. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye, this is to the Jews, shall be cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. Pharaoh is trying to wipe out the Jews. Not completely wipe them out, because they're very useful as slaves, but he doesn't want them to continue to grow the way they are. He's having all the male Hebrew children killed. And if that happens, what's eventually going to happen? Sort of run this through to the end. If you wipe out all the male Hebrew children, who are the women Hebrews going to marry? Non-Hebrews. And that then is going to start. Remember, we're talking about this genetic line, all right, that goes back to the covenant with Abraham in Genesis 22. If we go back to Genesis 22, God made a covenant with Abraham. In Genesis 22:16, and said, by myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son. Do we know somebody else who didn't withhold his only son? And in that blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. Here's the important piece. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Are all the nations of the earth blessed because of the Jewish nation? No. There's a verse that talks about that the Jews will be a millstone to the nations. So what's God talking about there? How is the entire world going to be blessed by Abraham's descendants? Who is one of Abraham's descendants? Bingo. It's from that line, it's from Abraham's line, his genetic line, that we're going to get the Messiah. And if you can break that line, you can't have a Messiah.
Not only that, but we regress through Abraham's line too, with like David.
Sure, but that's all part of that same line.
Yes.
That's all part of that same line. Ultimately,
Bless us even more.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, David's important, but David was just a man. Ultimately, with this seed word, all goes back to that prophecy of you shall bruise his heel, but he shall crush your head. He, Jesus, the Messiah. Let me go back. All right. So again, what Satan is trying to do is to somehow break that prophecy. Okay? Enmity between thy seed and the woman's seed. That's an interesting one there, by the way. Thy seed? Satan has seed? Yeah, he does. Let's look at that. Who is the woman's seed? Ultimately, who is the woman's seed? The one in the prophecy. Ultimately, who is the seed of the woman that God is talking about? Jesus, the Messiah. Who is Satan's seed that he's ultimately talking about? Go to Revelation. The Antichrist. The seed of Satan is the Antichrist. If we're looking at sort of a parallel, we're going to put enmity between you and the woman, between the devil and mankind, between the devil's seed and mankind's seed. Well, we got to, if we're doing that parallel, all right, between mankind and the devil, between mankind's seed, the Savior, Jesus, and Satan's seed, well, what's the opposite of that? Is the Antichrist. So we're looking at a way, Satan is trying to find a way to break that prophecy. You can't. You're not going to defeat God's prophecy. It's God. It's not going to happen. Doesn't mean he's not going to try. So attempt number 4. He keeps trying all throughout the Bible. He keeps trying. All right, the birth of Jesus. Let's look at the story of the birth of Jesus. Let's go to Matthew. Specifically that account. Matthew 2. And starting in verse 2. And it's talking about Herod. Herod said, where is he that is born king of the Jews? Well, this is the wise men that are speaking here. Where is he that is born king of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. When Herod the king heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And then jump down to verse 13. And when they, the wise men, were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise, take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. The wise men come, they come to Herod and ask about this star, and Herod says, oh, yeah, when you find him, come and tell me, because I want to come and worship him too. Right. And then because they were warned in a dream, the wise men went home in a different way. They didn't go back the same way they came, because again, they were afraid of retribution from Herod, and they didn't want to tell him where this baby was. And then continuing from verse 14, and he arose and took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt. And it was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled of which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, out of Egypt I have called my son. Verse 16, then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked by the wise men, was exceedingly wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and all the coast thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Remember, the wise men were not actually there when Jesus was a baby. This was almost 2 years afterwards. Again, there's that children's story thing, okay? The wise men show up when Jesus is a toddler. So Herod's mad because the wise men, they played him. They got the information they wanted. They went, they saw Jesus, but then they didn't come back and tell him. He wants to be able to try to destroy, and I believe with that satanic influence, he wants to be able to eliminate this king of the Jews. Of course, he doesn't want anybody that's going to be potentially challenging his rule over that area. So he has all the children killed that are under 2 years old. Again, if that would have succeeded, Jesus would have been killed. That, again, would break the prophecy. But an angel comes to Joseph in a dream and tells him to go to Egypt, to stay there. And then once Herod is dead, they come back and say, yep, all right, the king that's trying to kill your son is gone. You can come back to your homeland again. So again, it's another attempt for Satan to try to break that genetic line, to try to prevent the fulfillment of that prophecy that goes all the way back to Genesis and is through Genesis, through the flood, and onward. And this is where I got my idea to move forward from our flood study into our Revelation study. The mark of the beast, attempt number 5. The 5th attempt for Satan to try to defeat the prophecy. So if we go to Revelation, and we will be looking at this in significantly more detail, but if we go to Revelation 13, and we've got several specific verses. Revelation 13:1, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, the Antichrist, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And then down to verse 16 to 18, and he, the beast, causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let he that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man. His number is 666. And then chapter 14, verses 9 to 11. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive the mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascended forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Interesting sequence here. Is there a sin from which a person cannot repent? Yes, and there it is. Okay, if you worship the beast and receive the mark, you cannot repent of that sin. That's an interesting question as to why is it that you can't repent of that sin? Why is that the one that you can't repent of? Well, there's been a lot of speculation over the years of what is the mark of the beast. All right, we don't know. We won't know. I don't want to say we don't care because we're not going to be here. All right, we're going to be raptured out of this thing. We're not going to be here. But it doesn't, I mean, we can still speculate and look at it. So what is the mark of the beast? Well, for a long time, the thought was it was a tattoo. Tattoos are an ancient art. There were tattoos back in Egyptian times. So the thought was maybe it's a tattoo. It's some kind of permanent mark that once it's on you, you can't get rid of it. That's one thought. Then the 70s came and this weird thing came out called the barcode. And then all the evangelical speculation was it's going to be a barcode. Oh, they're going to They're going to tattoo a barcode onto your hand, all right? Because barcodes are a way to very quickly and easily have a number that's readable by a scanner to be able to determine, because anybody could, with a Sharpie, put a mark on your head or on your hand. But if it's not tied to, and again, this is also about the time that we start getting the rise of computer databases and things like that. It's not just, it doesn't imply that it's just the mark that allows you to buy and sell. You almost have to have that verified, that's legit. And with a scanner of some sort with a barcode, we can determine, is this a legitimate barcode? Then it was the microchip, okay? How many of you have a pet at home that is microchipped? That if they were to get lost, our 2 cats are, our dog was, all right? The little chip you put in to be able to track them, that God forbid if they get out and they get, somebody finds them and takes them to a shelter or something like that, they can scan for a microchip and they can contact us and you get your pet back. Great. Anybody heard of anybody doing the same thing with their kids? It happens. Oh, I'm gonna get the same kind of thing, the same kind of microchip put in my kid for the same reason. There was some thought, it has never happened, but there's some thought, what if we do the same thing for the military? All right? When you're in the military, especially in time of war, how do they determine who you are, God forbid if you die in battle? Dog tags. Yeah, you got a pair of dog tags around your neck. All right? Everybody knows why there's 2 of them, right? One stays on the body, one you take with you, so we've got record of who that person was. But if you've got a microchip of some sort, now you don't need dog tags, because dog tags can get lost, they can get torn off of your neck, whatever. All right? That's a possibility. It's interesting that all of the different speculations are based on some of the latest technology of the day. All right? Tattoo, very old technology. All right? If you said something about a barcode to somebody in the 1850s, they would look at you like you were nuts. If you said something about a microchip, about putting a computer in your hand to somebody in the 50s, a computer back in the 50s was the size of this room. And I mean, it's crazy how computer technology has advanced, how quickly it has advanced. I used to tell my students that literally any car out there in the parking lot has more computing power in it than all of NASA did when we landed a man on the moon in 1969. I mean, how close they came to crashing Apollo 11, because if you ever listen to the audio of the moon landing, all right, and you'll hear Armstrong say something about I think it's a 2013 alert. Basically, the computer was getting overloaded. It was getting too much data. And the computer was saying, no, too much stuff, I'm going to shut down. And Armstrong had to manually fly the spacecraft because it was getting ready to land in a field of boulders. He had to fly the spacecraft sideways about a half mile and land it in a clear area. And you'll hear in the audio, you'll hear somebody in the background say, 30 seconds. That's 30 seconds of fuel left. And they landed with about 11 seconds of fuel left because the computer was overloaded. Our modern computers, our car has more computing power. My cell phone has more computing power than a Cray supercomputer of the mid-70s. It's incredible the amount of power. Being able to think about being able to put that kind of information into something smaller than a grain of rice that you could implant in your forehead or in your hand. A lot of that speculation is based on that. The problem with all 3 of those is that theoretically, you can take it back. You can remove it. microchip can be removed, a barcode or a tattoo can conceivably be removed. Why is it that the mark of the beast, and we want to tie this together with everything that we've already looked at here, the seed war. Let's tie into this real reason for the flood. What was the real reason for the flood? The Nephilim. Okay? The Watchers, the sons of God and the daughters of men, and the contaminated genetic line to make it so that human beings are no longer human. And if you're not human, you can't be saved, because Jesus is here to save mankind, humans. If you genetically are not human, theoretically, you cannot be saved. So what if the mark of the beast is something that alters your genetic makeup? Has anybody ever heard of something called transhumanism? The transhumanism movement? Google that, watch the video. Transhumanism, that's one of Billy Crone's really strong things right now. And it's interesting, he just put out a brand new book on transhumanism and the Nephilim. The last time he was here, a couple, 3 years ago, this whole Nephilim thing was something I was interested in then. And I was thinking about doing something with that, whether it be to do a Sunday morning message, do a Wednesday night thing, to do something with that. And we chatted for a while, and it was interesting how he sort of poo-pooed it a little bit. That's not that big a deal. He sort of, I don't want to say he minimized it, but I wasn't getting an awful lot of support for that thought of it's something that I want to get out there. And now he's got a book on it. Because you're seeing how much more stuff is coming out about this thing. So what if that is what the mark is? What if the mark is something that alters your genetic makeup? Okay? Something called, and Billy has talked about it, it's in the news, something called CRISPR. It's that genetic process that allows scientists to be able to go into your genetic code, and it's, I'm not a biologist, but it's like a DNA scissors to go in and snip out a gene and put in another one. The problem is, once you do it, you can't put it back. You can't fix it. Once you do it, it's done. Once you cut it, it's happened. It's done. You can't undo it. There's a new one now. What was the new one called? CRISPR was the old one. There's a new one. There was another one. It was a video we had watched the other night. It's a better process from their standpoint. It's a better process. And the mindset is, oh, well, we're going to be able to go in and find the gene that causes prostate cancer or find the gene that causes breast cancer. They've done that already. They've figured out that there are some genes that make you more susceptible to breast cancer. Does it mean you're absolutely going to get it? No. But if you have that gene and you get it, it's going to be bad. Okay? One of those kind of things. What if you could figure out a way to test and remove that gene? Great. Except, as they're doing some of this research, they found with some of this stuff that, okay, cool, that one gene does this one bad thing, and it does 20 other good things. And you've taken out the bad part, but it's done 20 other good things. Now it's gone. And the key is, you can't undo that. What if the mark is in some way, shape, or form a way of genetic manipulation? Okay? And not saying thus saith the Lord, because again, if we go back, the tattoo, the barcode, the microchip, were the absolute definite, this has got to be what the mark of the beast is. It's just this interesting mindset that if it is something like this, If it is something like a genetic type of change, you can't undo that. You can't untake it. Once you've taken that mark, you can't reject it. You can't renounce it. And that goes back to, again, the whole mindset of the seed war. If you have done that, if you have changed your genetic code, are you now human? Okay? What's that? It's a problem in logic. I don't remember what it's called, but it's a boat. And if you have a boat and you replace this part of the boat, and then you replace this part of the boat, and you replace this part of the boat, and you replace this part of the boat, at what point is it no longer the original boat? If you've replaced literally every single board on the USS Constitution down in Baltimore, if every single board on that ship has been replaced at one time, is it still the original ship from the 1760s? Well, at some point, if you're making genetic manipulations, at what point are you no longer a human being? Again, that goes back to the seed war thing, all right? Again, it's a speculation, just like the barcode, just like the microchip, all right? But it does fit in with everything else that's here and everything that we've looked at in talking about the seed war and in looking at those other aspects that we've been looking at. Okay. So, with that is essentially the end of our study of the flood that we started all the way back the first week of April. All the way back that far back. So if you want, what I want to do, given we've got some time, I'm going to very quickly blow through my wrap up so that you have something to think about for the week. And then we're going to go in more detail with the wrap up next week. Like I said, as our sort of our question thing. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, anything that particularly stood out to you, jot it down, all right? And bring it on back next week and to be able to share. So since April, we started with the biblical narrative, all right? We verse by verse went through Genesis 6 through 9 and looked at the flood and saw a lot of interesting things about, we're sort of oversimplify that story a little bit, okay? And what major observations or takeaways did you get from that verse by verse? We then jumped to part 2, the scientific basis, which sort of tied back to my science in the Bible thing. And we sort of looked at the scientific evidence tied to the biblical account. Did the flood really happen? Is there evidence that we see on the earth to prove that the flood actually happened? Something more than just this. Not that this is insufficient. All right, we know that this is sufficient. If it says it here, we know it's true. But there's so much, as we saw, there's so much geological and hydrological and physical evidence to support what the flood narrative talks about. And again, any thoughts on that particular section? Then the reason for the flood, which was the shortest. We did that in 1 week. We blew through part 3 in 1 week because it was the easiest and most straightforward, all right? There was evil in the world, man sinned, God was mad about that, and I'm sorry I even made man, so I'm going to wipe him out, okay? But as we went through that, it sort of presented more questions than it answered. So that led us to have to go a little bit deeper into part 4, the real reason for the flood, which was, again, that was my original planned lesson, was to talk about the Nephilim. That was the sort of the germ from which this almost 6-month study came out. But in order to understand the Nephilim and understand that aspect, we had to lay a lot of foundation stuff first. We had to go into a real deep dive. It wasn't just the surface reading. And it was that real deep analysis of Genesis 6, 1 through 4, which linked back to the fall story in Genesis 6. All right, the seed war, and that's what we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks. It tied the seed war to the flood and the thread that literally weaves its way all the way from the Bible, through the Bible, from Genesis all the way to Revelation. And that lays the groundwork for where we're going next, which is our verse by verse of Revelation. So, next week, I'm going to go through the same thing I just did. All right, my wrap up bit. Go back here. All right, in a little bit more detail. We'll talk a little bit more about it. And then, again, as you think about those 4 areas that we've looked at, what specific things, what areas jump out at you? What I did do, by the way, again, I put up on, as a link on Facebook, I did put PDF files, open with preview, there we go. And that's when you bring up the PDF file, it literally is each slide one by one. It's not as a PowerPoint, but it's all of my individual slides for the 4 parts of what we've looked at. I have put part 4 up, okay? So don't open, if you open part 4, all right, which is the real reason for the flood, if you open part 4, stop at the wrap up, okay? Don't go on to my big picture takeaways, okay? Because that's next week. I don't want to spoil next week. But go. You can download those and can take a look at those to be able to see, are there any points that you have any questions on that you weren't sure about, any points you'd like to raise. Big takeaways, not necessarily just questions, but takeaways. What things really struck you? What things really, wow, I didn't know that type of thing. And then we'll talk about our big picture takeaways, the problem solving and the critical thinking skill things that I want you to take away from our study. And then we're going to do, I'm not sure if it's going to be 2 shorter videos or 1 longer video. And if I go back to my PowerPoint, I can sort of cheat here. Go out of that. Come on, you. That's what I want. So our upcoming schedule, next week is going to be the wrap up, okay? The wrap up and question and answer, okay? Then typo there. The 23rd is going to be the wrap up. The 30th and the 6th is the class summary. And I'm not sure if I'm going to use 1 long video that we're going to split over the 2 weeks or 2 shorter videos from Ryan Pitterson. But just some great stuff that he has that sort of solidifies some of the things that we've looked at. And then on the 13th of September, we're going to start the new class topic, which is the verse by verse of Revelation. I'm going to start that first week with a little bit of introduction of why should we do this, a little bit of history and of the book of Revelation, where did it come from, all that kind of thing. Sort of that, how some Bibles have at the beginning of each book, there's like a paragraph that tells you a little bit about the book. Yeah, and not even just a synopsis, but like who wrote it, when did he write it, where was he, why, all right? Like especially if you think about like all the New Testament epistles, all right? Who wrote it, when did he write it? Who did he write it to? How did it get there? That kind of thing. We're going to look at that about Revelation, and an overview of the structure of the book, and some things with that on the 13th, and then start the verse by verse. And the way I'm sort of planning on doing this at the end of each week is saying, okay, so we just finished Revelation 1 verse 10. Next week we're going to keep going. So you'll be able to read. It's I don't want to say it's homework, but it's preparation. To be able to read the upcoming, say, chapter of Revelation, so that when we come in and we go through verse by verse by verse, you've already seen it once, and you can sort of have some ideas, questions, thoughts, whatever. It is definitely going to be a little bit different format than what I've done from January up to now. It's definitely going to be a little bit more facilitated, definitely a lot more. I'm going to be trying to drag more out of you guys. So make my job easier by reading it ahead of time. That's not until September, the middle of September, but it gives you time to be able to start. I found some really great resources to be able to help me with putting this together, because it's challenging. How many people have ever done a verse by verse of Revelation? A few people. And that's a bigger deal now. When was the last time you heard a preacher preach on Revelation?
Very rarely, yeah.
So many pastors are scared to death of it. They're afraid of it. They're afraid of it. And yet, Revelation, and it's one of the things that I'm really excited about it. I'm also a little nervous about it. There's a reason why. Revelation 1 verse 3, blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. All right, for the time is at hand is like a little bit scary. Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy. God promises a blessing to people that study this prophecy. Is that verse, is that wording anywhere else in any other book of the Bible? No. It's the only one that specifically says that. You realize there's a challenge behind that, though. Say again? Not just that. Worse.
So the purpose of Revelation also is to drive us to holiness and to want to take others with us on that journey.
It's not where I was going. It's true. What's Revelation the story of? And
His second coming.
I'm looking specifically for another person and his defeat. The defeat of Satan and the Antichrist. We know the end of the story. We know who wins. Do you think he's going to be happy about us reading about this and studying this?
No, so that's going to be
That makes me nervous.
Jesus is with you.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%.
Who is in you is greater than
He promises a blessing. Satan doesn't like that idea. But I'm really excited about it. I really am. I'm very, very excited about it. I'm really talking it up. Trying to get some more attendance for the class. But I am really, really excited about it. It's like I said, it is going to be different. We're going to lay it out a little bit differently. My slides are not going to be the verses. All right, you're going to have the Bible open in front of you. We're going to read the verses from the Bible, and then I'm going to have PowerPoint slides of key points that I got out of those verses to help stimulate our conversation, discussion about it. So that's sort of my mindset as to where I'm going. All right. So with that, we're going to close and pray. Lord, we thank you so much for the day that you've given to us, for the safety and travel, for bringing us together again this week, for the faithful attendance of everyone here for this class. I thank you so much for you giving me these two studies that we've completed to be able to share, and the ability that I have to be able to share it, Lord. I pray for our upcoming study as we wrap this one up, for our summary next week, so that we would really put a big bow on this particular study and all the things that we've learned. And we look forward with anticipation, and we claim the blessing that you promise to us for those that study the book of Revelation. We're looking forward to that. I pray that you would be with our service today, be with Pastor. Keep him in your loving hands, Lord. Protect him. Keep the pain in his face away, so that he may present your message clear and strong, and that we may have open hearts to hear and to do. All these things we ask in your Son's precious name. Amen.